Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Bothwell from Waste 360 with Derek Bienhoff, Executive Vice President of Asset Management for Covanta. Welcome, Derek, and thanks for being on the show today.
Liz, thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. It's a great day today.
Awesome. Well, we usually start in the beginning, so I'd love to hear about your background and how you ended up at Covanta.
Oh, my goodness. I've been here a long time, actually. I think I've racked up now 24 years in the energy from waste business as part and parcel of Covanta. So my roots are actually out of Canada, which is where I grew up. I never once envisioned that I would be in the waste business, quite honestly. I grew up on a dairy farm in southwestern Ontario and went to an agricultural college for about 8 years. You know, that's an extended stay in an agricultural college. I did an undergraduate degree in environmental science and then actually ended up doing a master's degree in soil mechanics and soil physics. And, you know, at the time, you know, there were some waste management projects that I was involved in that some other researchers were working on, where I was a project scientist with those folks as well. And I swore at the time that I would never enter the waste business. So a funny story was about a year after I graduated with my master's degree, I ended up starting to work for a division of W.R. Grace, which was it's a big publicly traded company up in Canada that had a focus, a small niche group of scientists that were working on bioremediation. So I immediately went from saying I wasn't going to be in the waste business to being in the waste business. And a short time later, actually a year or so later, I joined Covanta. At the time, this was another company called American Refuel, which Covanta purchased in 2005. But back in 1996, I joined this company, American Refuel, as a waste manager. So I was responsible for procuring waste for one of the plants that we run today. It's a sizable asset. It's like 800,000 tons a year. And it had just undergone a retrofit. It was quite an exciting time up there in Niagara Falls, New York. So that's where I kind of learned the business, so to speak. I spent 6 years in Niagara. A very complex plant. You know, it's a plant where we sell steam. I got to do some steam deals. It was heavily into the merchant waste market in Western New York and up in the Toronto market, so I got to learn about markets. And then from there, I came down to Metro New York. I think it was 2002. Yeah, 2002. I came down to Metro New York and became the business manager for two of our assets, our Hempstead plant in New York out on Long Island. It's a sizable plant, about 1 million tons a year, and then also our Essex plant in Newark, New Jersey, also about 1 million tons a year. So I had my hands full coming down from Western New York into this New York City waste market, which was a lot of fun. But I really had a good experience in learning the business in both of those locations. So since then, I've managed to be lucky enough to move up the corporate ladder. I had varying responsibilities, but, in essence, over the last 4 or 5 years, I think I've had responsibility for asset management, which is broadly the plants themselves, all the energy from waste plants that we operate here in North America, and the one plant in the UK, in Dublin, in Ireland, and then the waste transfers also fall under my jurisdiction, and energy also is now under my purview. That's quite complicated, just like the waste business is. And, that's kind of my story.
Oh, that's great. And you're not alone, Derek, when you say you had
very little intention of getting into the business, and then you ended up staying because it became your home. That I've heard that so many times, and I think it just speaks volumes about the industry itself.
Yeah, I like to tell people that really what I did was join urban agriculture. The crop is just getting rid of waste.
So true.
But it's been interesting. It's always been a dynamic business. I like complexity, and certainly, the energy from waste business is quite complex. And the people in the waste business in general, I've been fortunate enough to be very externally focused, with the customer base over the years, and it's always interesting. A lot of interesting people out there that I get to have had the opportunity to work with over the years and do a lot of business with. So it's been fun.
Oh, I bet. It's such a fun industry. And so, you've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure you haven't seen anything quite like this pandemic. It seems like Covanta has fared pretty well. I've been on earnings calls and, been following you guys. Could you talk a little bit about the pandemic's impact on the business and the industry as a whole?
Sure. So I'm like everybody else, right? We started the year with high expectations on what was going to happen, and I don't think anybody said, "Oh yeah, by the way, this pandemic's going to hit the window in the early part of 2020." So yeah, it was. We really started gearing around the pandemic in late February. Our supply chain actually got a little bit in advance of a lot of the shutdown items in late February and started making plans around what if scenarios. So we were, I think, very fortunate that the supply chain team here at Covanta actually was thinking pretty broadly about the what ifs. And then, of course, a lot of our business is done on this I-95 corridor from Boston to D.C., which, in March, basically the second week of March, a lot of that was getting shut down. I think our last day in the office was something like the 8th or 9th of March, if I recall, before we closed the corporate office. So it happened really quick in the first couple of weeks of March for us at Covanta. And then all the planning was around, for our business, we do a lot of scheduled outages for energy from waste plants, the maintenance work we try to do in the shoulder months of the year. So March, April, May is very intensive around, work in the plants where we're taking units offline and doing work on. And of course, with COVID, that really threw a monkey wrench into those plans, right? Because we were concerned about bringing contractors on site. What kind of protocol did we have to go through to protect our employees at our facilities while they were performing an essential service, which, the waste business really is, and we are. So we spent a lot of time thinking through, what do we need to do to protect our employees, to protect our contractors. We ended up delaying a lot of that maintenance work early and then rescheduling to later parts of the year. I think we really started back into it late April, early May, where we were more tentative and very cautious about what we were doing, how we were doing it. And now we have a lot of protocols around site work and who gets to come on site, and that's still in play at all of our facilities. So, and I expect that that's going to continue until, we get some break in the COVID, either in the form of vaccine or, everybody's best wish, which would be for COVID to just go away, which I don't anticipate happening anytime soon. So on the waste side of the business, that also was complicated. We're fairly contracted as a company. I'm sure Liz, as you point out, you've been following us for a while. So we do a lot of work in these major municipalities, cities, across the board. And certainly with the delay of outages in the early March, April timeframe, and the decision that we would run but limit exposure for our employees. And then we had wide-scale businesses basically shutting down, so commercial waste volumes really dropped unexpectedly. So we had to do a little bit of a scramble for about a month where, we had to infill and change locations for where we were taking our transfer station waste to ensure supply. And, fortunately for us, we're in, pretty good locations, and we have a great customer base that we were able to work with and kind of shuffle things around and get through that. And over time, I think we saw the depth of, volume loss around the middle of April. And like all the other waste companies, it seemed the volume started to build in the latter part of April and early May, to the point where in July and August, we were basically back to what I would call almost normalized run rates. But I think, the commercial collectors out there, I'm sure their volumes are down. I think, based on what I've heard and read, anywhere from, 5 to 25% loss in the commercial volume standpoint. We've been fortunate that we've been able to fill that with residential volumes. Our residential volumes are a little higher. So it's been a very unique experience, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. It's unlike anything we've ever seen, but I'm glad to see that you all are faring well, and the industry as a whole is just so resilient. It's great to see.
Yeah. We've had some significant surprises, as I'm sure everybody in the industry has. The one I like to always point to, which I never thought would happen, was, we have a contract with New York City for a lot of the Manhattan waste direct haul to our Newark plant in New Jersey. I never once envisioned that so many people would move out of Manhattan to other places in the country. So that was a very unique lens into COVID, quite frankly, and to how the world is changing around how people can work remotely and be pretty mobile when they're given the decision or opportunity to go do so, if they think it's in their best interest to do that. So that was pretty eye-opening for me, and I'm sure would be for most people.
Oh, definitely. And I know a lot of those New York City folks have probably, I know they've come up to Connecticut where I am, and I'm sure where you are in New Jersey. So we'll see, even just industry-wise, if it all evens out residentially speaking. But I know last I read, it was more than 10,000 people had fled the city. So in a very short period of time.
Yeah, all I can tell you is I know from residential sales, which I follow in my local town in North Jersey, and I know Connecticut's not any different. There certainly has been a lot of real estate that's moved. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the vaccine, and if life stabilizes, what happens in the next phase. So
definitely,
I hope we get
it'll be. Yes, agree. So I know that also Covanta has been talking about environmental justice for a long time, and it's definitely more than a buzzword for you guys. Can you tell me more about that and how it impacts the communities that you serve?
Well, yes, certainly this 2020 year has been eye-opening in many respects, right? From a national and even international perspective on the Black Lives Matter item. So yes, we have environmental justice for us is it's not a new topic. Maybe it is for people over this summer, where it really became quite loud in many respects. But for us, we've been pretty active around this area as a company. It really started in what we think was the heart of environmental justice, which was down in Chester, Pennsylvania, where we bought an asset in the late 1990s in the Chester community, and it's a large facility. And there were a lot of issues at that time around that plant. with the previous owners, and the company made a very dedicated effort at that time to engage. And we didn't have an environmental justice policy at that time. It was just like, hey, we need to engage with this community because they have a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happened. Here's this big plant within their community that they don't really understand and know a lot about, other than it has increased their truck traffic, and it seems like there's problems that historically had been there under the previous ownership. So we engaged. We had a couple of really key people that engaged for us at that time, and the one gentleman, I'm going to mention his name. He's now deceased, sadly, John Waffenschmidt, and he was really a pioneer for us. And it became his full-time role in the company was around environmental justice. And ultimately, we developed what I think is, and still is, not what I think, I know is a good relationship with that community, with some key members within that community and with the city of Chester, and ultimately led us to forming this environmental justice policy that we've had since about 2011. I think we were one of the first companies in the country to actually really formally adopt a policy around this, which is really a policy around engagement and understanding and communication and openness and transparency. And then there's a second part to it, which is, we as a company have an obligation. We're operating in these communities, whether they're environmental justice communities or not. We have stacks, which a lot of people are very uncertain about, right? The stack, we say internally, very much so, right? It's very prominent on the horizon. Everybody can look to it. And people get pretty nervous about smokestacks. So engagement is critical. We want to drive our emissions as low as we can get them, and we've got a company commitment to continue to improve our emission profile. And I think, even in our last sustainability report, we said, hey, we want to do 5 emission improvement projects for Covanta by 2023 timeframe, and some of those 5 are actually underway right now. Where we're voluntarily going ahead to reduce our emission profile as a commitment to being a good citizen within the places that we operate. And I think, the waste industry, whether you're running a landfill or a transfer station or a recyclery or, any other waste-related item, there's a lot of eyes on you. We know that. So engagement in the community and transparency is so key to long-term success. And we have some pretty good communities where we've done that very successfully, and people have engaged back, and it's it makes it a lot more fun, right? When you get engagement. And then we have a couple other communities where the engagement maybe isn't as forthcoming, and we keep trying, but people get pretty leery about big waste infrastructure, and it takes time to break down the barriers, especially around EJ.
I bet. And I feel like you've done a good job about that and with that. And I think you're right. Transparency and communication is so key. And educating people on the reality of what's coming, right, to their community, not what they've read or heard. So that's great.
Yeah, it's a complicated business, right? There's a lot of data, a lot of heavy science in what we do. It's very technical. And, even if you have a good technical mind and you step into this business, it can be pretty overwhelming, right? So you gotta figure out a way to put the science in a way that people can understand, be comfortable, experience, get them into the plants. When we get people into the plants, I think we gain a lot from that, and they gain a lot from it too. They see the people, the Covanta employees are just like everybody else, and we've got longevity in our employee base. So, people like being in this business. They like doing the right thing, and when people cross the threshold into a plant and see that, it kind of opens their eyes and says, hey, you don't need to be scared. Just ask questions. We're here to try to help you understand what we do, show you the benefits. I mean, as humans, we all produce waste, right? That's not changing anytime soon. And the waste needs to be handled responsibly. Doesn't matter what technology you're using in the waste industry, it needs to be done responsibly. And, for people to understand that, it takes engagement.
Definitely. And I like the concrete way of you inviting the community in to actually see what's happening. That always helps. It hit home for people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
And Derek, I know you've mentioned even just during our short time talking how important waste to energy is, and it's a core part of your business. And I know your process has been described as a true closed loop one. Can you walk me through what that means?
Well, true closed loop, right? So we take the product, waste, household waste, municipal solid waste, non-hazardous, that's collected by municipalities or private collectors, and we put it into a sophisticated boiler under sophisticated combustion control. Obviously, the carbon in that waste material gets combusted. We use that combustion heat to generate steam. So these are boilers, like industrial plants use boilers. We create the steam, and either we sell steam directly to end users, or we convert the steam into electrons and sell it into the grid. And then after the combustion process, you're left with residual, and the residual is ash and usually post-combustion metals, which could be ferrous metal or non-ferrous metals like copper, aluminum, and other non-ferrous products. And if you've been following our company over the last several years, the company's invested a lot in that recovery aspect of the residue, which I think is, on a go-forward basis, is going to be increasingly important for our company and as part of the closed loop item. But let me backtrack for a second and give you some good examples of like closed loop, which, I think we have one really good example, which is our Niagara Falls, New York plant, which I obviously know very well, having spent so many years there. So at Niagara Falls, the bulk of the energy that we create is put into 2 turbine generators. So we produce some power, and then we also extract steam that we sell to, I think it's 6 industrial users on a steam line right around the plant. So if you could think about the perfect industrial setting where you had one energy host and a bunch of plants, other manufacturers situated around that and drawing off that plant, that's a good mental picture to have. And one of the key industrial users, and again, we have a bunch there. I'm going to pick on one, which is our largest customer. It's actually a linerboard mill, which is operated by a company called GreenPack. Their parent company is Noranpak. And the linerboard mill is obviously making product for the cardboard industry, for the corrugated cardboard. It's the liner within the cardboard itself. And what they do is they use recycled cardboard to make that product. So it's like a perfect scenario where you have a waste company that's taking the non-recyclable waste, producing steam. You have a recycling-oriented company making a product, an end product, that serves the recycling industry as a buyer of recycled product. And together we're able to make this product and basically have a loop system. And any waste that they make, we also can take into our plant. So we close the loop largely for them on a sustainability basis. We actually just got an award from a business intelligence group for that case study around Niagara, which is fantastic. So, the ash and metals recovery piece that we've been developing so much, like traditionally our ash has gone to landfill for the most part, either as primary cover, beneficial use cover in a bunch of MSW landfills, or into a monofill, ash-only monofill. And I think the holy grail for a lot of the energy from waste business for years has been we all recognize that there's more value in the ash than just putting it into the landfill, even as a beneficial use. And what we've been able to ascertain through a lot of R&D, research and development, is there's a significant amount of metals that are contained in the ash, and they're small. They're micron-sized pieces of metal, and it's largely prevented the use of ash, particularly bottom ash, because there was no real good technology to remove that metal. And if you have a product that's contaminated with something else, it's hard to make into a real beneficial use aggregate. So over the last bunch of years, we've been focused on let's get that metal out of our ash, out of the bottom ash in particular. So we've been developing this total ash processing concept where it's a wet treatment. We treat the ash. We're able to extract using a bunch of different technologies, both large metal and small micron-sized pieces of metal out of the material. And obviously that has value, right? Particularly non-ferrous metals. And when I talk about non-ferrous metals, it ranges from the obvious ones like aluminum and copper all the way down to the less obvious ones, which are like if there's tiny bits of silver or gold or stainless within the waste, the boilers themselves, the furnace where we're combusting the waste in, almost act to generate an ore. And so the technology we're using is really combining a bunch of technologies from the mining industry such that we can mine the ore, and the ore is the ash, pull the metals out, and end up with some pretty clean aggregate products that can be reused. So that's kind of the closed loop system.
That's a great explanation. Thank you. And congrats on that award, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. A lot of hard work went into that. And I want to congratulate our partners up there, like GreenPack made a phenomenal decision several years ago to site the state-of-the-art linerboard mill in Western New York. It was a huge investment in the local economy. I think it was like $500 million of investment for the state-of-the-art plant. So just, I think, a fantastic story for Western New York and for the two companies, and as an outlet for recycling, which we know right now in North America, we really don't have enough outlets for recycled product. When China closed with their policy change, it created a lot of issues in the waste industry, right? So to have places domestically that can use product and help the recycling industry is, I think, that's a great outcome for everybody.
Yes, it definitely is. And I know I have two questions based on what you've said. And the first is, I mean, do you think energy from waste will be more widely adapted here in the U.S. as we look toward more sustainable solutions? Do you think that trend is coming?
I think from a science standpoint, the more people get comfortable with the science of modern energy from waste, or some people in the overseas call it incineration. We've traditionally shied away from that word, but we're also starting to use the word incineration now too, from time to time. As people get more comfortable with the science and the benefits on displacement from a greenhouse gas perspective, it's a positive story from a greenhouse gas perspective, despite the fact we have a smokestack. But I also think that there are some pretty big other hurdles that exist in North America, which are, one, energy is quite cheap here. We're blessed in North America. We have abundant natural gas. Energy is quite cheap. And, it's one of the byproducts we create from our process is energy. So it's being sold into a pretty cheap commodity market right now. There's a lot of of space in North America, from a land perspective. So I think the industry has been fortunate to date that landfills have been able to site within a reasonable distance of where waste gets generated. I think that that's going to change over time. And it is changing. I mean, we're starting to see some markets where there are no new landfills being permitted. Look in New England. The state of Massachusetts certainly is one where they haven't cited a landfill, and I don't even know the number. It's a long time. Might be my whole existence in the waste industry. So they've been on this run rate of closing landfills in the state. And I think, anywhere in the Northeast in particular, the waste industry is going to be susceptible to that. So then you end up with choices that you can make, which is, you're going to move the waste much further away from where it was generated. And the complexity of that starts changing a lot. So you have a bigger environmental footprint when you start moving waste a long way. And not only that, but you have a significantly altered cost structure, right? So your transportation costs are going to change tremendously as well. They're going to increase. So I think there's a time and a place for energy from waste. I think that time and place is really still coming. And commodity markets are cyclical, as we've seen for many, many years. That predates my time in the business. At one time, a barrel of oil was a couple $100 in the 70s oil crisis. You couldn't even get gasoline. So you've got to have in mind that energy markets can be cyclical. There's downturns, and then the upturns can be pretty wild. And I think there's a possibility that the upturn and the changing, what I call the changing energy dynamic, which is the electrification of transportation, really could alter what the electron is also worth. So you have to have a long lens on the business. I think in North America, that's certainly true. The technology is much more widely adopted in Europe, and we're, as I'm sure we're building a number of plants in the UK right now. We're not the only ones that are building plants in the UK right now. They traditionally were a landfill-based waste management system in the UK. They're moving away from that. They've placed a large tax on landfilling. Scandinavia has done the same thing. Most of Western Europe's done that, and there's a lot more familiarity with the technology, and actually places embrace the technology. The project that I like to look at as a most useful reminder of what community acceptance could look like is the new plant in Copenhagen, which has a ski hill on it. It has a climbing wall. It has a living vegetation wall up the side of the building, and it's become the hip part of town to actually have a restaurant in and whatnot. And so the community has really embraced it. And it's just interesting to see the differences, cultural differences, when you look at that versus anything here in the waste business is tough. But certainly citing a new energy from waste plant here is also tough unless you have the right groundwork laid and the right leadership around it.
True. Oh, that sounds really cool in Copenhagen.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling actually. Whenever I see the photos, and we've had some people tour, and they've said, really interesting things. But it goes to show you, like, you can make projects, and even our new Dublin asset that we have a joint venture partnership with. It's only a few years old. When you see that plant and the aesthetics of that plant, it's sited in the port. It's very visible because Dublin doesn't have a high-rise skyline. Most of the buildings are much more squat, and so you can really see the plant, and visually the plant is actually, I think, aesthetically quite pleasing and at times quite stunning. I mean, it looks so modern. And we've been we actually light the plant. I don't know if you've seen that at all on our website. We actually light the plant at certain times of the year. At Christmas time, it's lit as part of Dublin's celebration of the holiday season. So we have, it's lit up in the holiday spirit. It makes for a pretty dynamic and less threatening piece of infrastructure.
Definitely. Oh, I love that. And hey, it proves that you're built right into the community and trying to make it lovely for everyone, which is always good. And I know we talked a little bit about recycling, and you mentioned how hard it's been hit the last couple of years with the China bans and now COVID for sure. I know this is a big question, but what do you think is the future of recycling, Derek?
Well, now that one is really complicated. Well, I think, first of all, I do think a lot more thought has to go into product design. I think, that is one of the keys. I think people are asking the waste business to do tremendous things. I mean, we do recycling. We do it within the plants, right? I spoke about the metals and mining the ore. But we don't run any material recovery facilities, MRFs, as standalone projects. So other people in the waste business do that. And I think society is asking them to do a lot with the products that people put out on the curb. Most of them the product design came as either fancy packaging to dress the product up, to make it appealing to the consumer visually, or not a lot of thought was put into what kind of product they wanted the casing of the product that they were selling, what they wanted around that, right? It could be cost basis or what have you that drove the decisions versus, hey, we have a product stewardship obligation here. How do we make this easier to reclaim in the waste system? So I think there's a good part of society really needs to think about what they want from that, and we have to do some redesign of products to make it easier for the waste industry to reclaim them. And if we do that, I also think it becomes easier for the secondary industries that support recycling to cite, right, and to be economical. So the linerboard mill up in Western New York that we work so closely with is a great example. To get a nice, clean, corrugated piece of cardboard coming from a recyclery, generally speaking, but not everybody gets access to those nice, clean, individual products. And for those secondary businesses that are trying to make something from the recycled product, you got to give it to them in a way that makes it easier for them to make an end-use product that people find attractive and useful. So I think there's that. I also think that the industry, and I agree with this a lot, has gone to a different kind of cost model, which, if you're going to have a material recovery facility, these things are not cheap anymore. And there's a lot of complicated equipment. There's a lot of maintenance. You have to have a cost of capital coming back, and you have to take some of the risk of the actual commodity out of the cost structure. And I know a lot of the companies have been moving away from a pure, hey, we'll take it and we'll take all that commodity risk on our back. And then you have something like what happened with China, which a large part of the Western world was relying on for the product. All of a sudden that's gone away, and they're like, well, gee, I got to pay to get rid of this product that I just put all this work into. That obviously doesn't work. So I think it's a complicated web within the recycling industry, but I certainly support product re-engineering, and then also we need industry here in North America to take some of these products, and we need to support that. So I think there's a lot of societal questions around that we've got to address and ensure that allow that to happen, because I think people now expect recycling to just happen. And when people just start expecting, it's like when they put the waste on the curb, they don't generally know where it goes, and a lot of people don't really give it a lot of thought. As a society, we have to give it more thought if we're going to get to the right answer.
Definitely. And like you said, the responsibility is with everyone, right? It's the designers, the manufacturers, the consumer, our industry. So everyone has to look at it to really come up with solutions. But I'm optimistic that it will happen. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. I mean, the industry has made, with the technology that they've embraced, has made leaps and bounds of progress over the last, decade for sure. So I think that's going to continue, just like the technology that we're using, like Moore's law is ramping up everywhere, right? And you're able to use technologies that you never thought you could or didn't exist, but technology development allows you to attack problems in a much different way than you once thought was available. So it could be, a solution could be within the technologies itself. So.
Absolutely. And hey, challenges breed innovation, so we're definitely hitting that mark.
Yeah, that's true. We use that phrase a lot internally. Hopefully not in a good way.
Hey, forced innovation's a good thing too, right?
Yeah, exactly. The mother of all invention.
Exactly. So you really seem to have a proven record of working well with municipalities. Any tips or secrets you want to share about that for our listeners? Because I know it's collaboration and being a good partner is a big challenge for many people.
Yes, we have a lot of experience with municipal partners. The business is really fundamentally based around that relationship. So advice. Well, I think my advice that I give internally to new recruits and people from the outside that are entering the business, I mean, within a private company, your thoughts on a solution actually can come together really quickly, right? You have this innovation and necessity that's driving it. On the municipal side with the municipal partners, right? It's a different process, and you have to have a fair element of patience around timing, around what is realistic to get done. You have a lot of factors that push on your external partners that you don't see within the waste company itself, right? So there's election time frames. They have their own budgets that they've got to manage. They have procurement rules. They have people that change out of roles, and then that can cause a setback in terms of relationships. So I would tell you the number one thing you need is vision, patience. And then the second thing is the vision aspect. Is you really need to make sure that you're balancing both sides of the equation. When I say that, I mean you really have to put yourself on the other side of the business arrangement and try to appreciate and try to see what can work on that side versus what you think works for your side. And it's not always a pleasant journey. Don't get me wrong. It can be at times, pretty frustrating for both sides. But I think you have to approach it with an open mind, and at times probably with an open heart, and say, like, really, I really want to do the best thing here. What's the best thing? Sometimes on the other side, the best thing is, well, what's my lowest price? That's not necessarily always the best thing. At times, that's the way the market rules, but not always is that the best thing. So it's a delicate balance. You have to have patience. You have to have a vision of what makes sense longer term. Design for a longer term. Let's make it easy for everybody. So that would be my advice. Never easy.
I think that's good. No, it's not easy, and I think that's great advice. You do have to have an open mind and open heart. And I remember someone on the show once told me, you have to enter it knowing that these municipalities have a million things on their mind, and the waste and recycling industry is a very small part of that. So know that they're coming in with that, and you can appreciate their time even more.
Yeah, well, imagine if you're trying to balance a budget right now on the municipal side. Yeah, you have, police, firefighting, waste management is a huge item on their expense side. So, I think most elected officials and staff, they're challenged in that regard. They're like, I need to cut costs because I have all these other services that people expect us to do. How do I balance it, right? So it's I think particularly now with COVID, the pandemic, and a lot of business uncertainty on a go-forward basis, the waste industry is really going to have to look hard at, like, okay, how do we make this work for our partners on the municipal side in a way that's productive, and we're not fighting each other over the end objectives. It's a difficult task.
It is. Well, this has been great, Derek. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we end? I know I've asked you a lot.
Yeah. No, I've shared 24 odd years of my experience here in the energy from waste business. It's like when we started the conversation, it's been a lot of fun. The technical aspects of being in the waste business make it quite interesting. I hope that people that listen to this take the time to explore energy from waste. It's pretty fascinating. It's a lot more robust than I think a lot of people think. And over time, technology is going to allow some of the things that people criticize our business about, which our emissions, about the ash. I think over time there's going to be solutions around that might surprise a lot of people and make it even more friendly than it already is as compared to the alternatives. So, just like I said, you got to approach your municipal partners with patience and an open heart and a vision. You got to look at our business and say, wow, this is complicated, but look what it does. And I think if we can get more people saying that, I think business is going to be fine. It's going to be great.
I think you're right, and I do hope that people do take the time to look into it. It's fascinating, and I love how during this chat you talked about the business side of it and the scientific side of it, and how it's good for community. So I think you've been great, and what a great story. So thank you for sharing today.
Well, thank you, Liz, for having me as part of your podcast.
Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch soon.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Yep.
You too. Bye. Bye.